Great news, everybody. Neil Young has announced he is returning to Spotify and ending his boycott of the streaming giant just over 2 years after he removed all of his music from the platform in protest of podcaster Joe Rogan apparently having a show. At the time, he was contesting Spotify's relationship with Rogan following a group of doctors who were protesting some of the guests Rogan was having on centered around COVID and particularly the vaccine. Neil Young was very much opposed to Spotify's decision to have a relationship with Rogan. Now, Rogan is, of course, one of the most influential people in the world. Right now, his podcast has an estimated 11 million listeners per episode. That number is probably higher at this point. And just a couple of weeks ago, Spotify announced they were renewing their deal with Joe Rogan and simultaneously allowing him to begin uploading his full podcast up to YouTube once again, something that hasn't been done in the last few years. The point of this is that Spotify is expanding their partnership with Joe Rogan, not limiting it. Now, Neil Young was really trying to get a movement of musicians going from pulling their music down from these streaming platforms as a form of protest against Rogan. This is the open letter he released at the time demanding his music get taken down. I am doing this because Spotify is spreading fake information about vaccines, potentially causing death to those who believe the disinformation being spread by them. Please act on this immediately today and keep me informed of the time schedule. So this was urgent matter for him at the time. I want you to let Spotify know immediately today that I want all my music off their platform. They can have Rogan or Young, not both. He continues, with an estimated 11 million listeners per episode, JRE, which is hosted exclusively on Spotify, is the world's largest podcast and has tremendous influence. Spotify has a responsibility to mitigate the spread of misinformation on its platform, though the company presently has no misinformation policy. Now, considering he was making some very strong demands there of Spotify, I would have liked to have seen some more specifics. What specifically did he say that was untrue? There's none of that in the letter, just that blanket term misinformation that a lot of people like to throw around. Well, the argument wasn't very compelling because Spotify ultimately decided to stick with Rogan, which they did to their great credit, and they released a statement at the time in response. But when you're asking to remove someone from the internet and not allow them to speak, that is really an extraordinary request. And other than using the term misinformation, he really didn't make his case very well. And here was the response at the time from Spotify responding to that request from Neil Young. To their great credit, they kept Rogan up on the platform. They said at the time, "We want all the world's music and audio content to be available to Spotify users. With that comes great responsibility in balancing both safety for listeners and freedom for creators. We have detailed content policies in place, and we've removed over 20,000 podcast episodes related to COVID since the start of the pandemic. We regret Neil's decision to remove his music from Spotify, but hope to welcome him back soon." Content moderation with these tech companies is something that's very complicated, just considering the amount of content that's uploaded there on a daily basis. They're not always going to get it right, but there has to be an emphasis on fairness, on freedom of speech, and helping people understand why their content is being removed. But this really opens a whole can of worms when you get into Spotify, because you could go down many different prominent artists on that platform and you could probably find problems with them. And once you go into removing certain individuals from the platform, it opens up a question and you get into this comparison where you go, well, this person did this and their music's still up. But in this situation, not removing Rogan was absolutely the right thing. You'll hear a lot of people who like Neil Young's music. I think he's an amazingly talented musician. He's had a wonderful career. And, a lot of people will say, I like Neil, but I don't really agree with him on this. I'm not really sure that this was the fight to make. And I think he could have released a statement condemning Rogan. But once you remove your music from Spotify, you have this situation where you're just never going to be on this modern platform again. It's really complicated. And adding to that is the fact that prior to making this announcement, according to reports, Neil Young had apparently sold his catalog to another company. And after he sold the music to another company, he requested that it's removed from Spotify. Now, I don't know the individual terms of that deal. There was reporting on it. Let's take a look. Now, check this out. Neil Young sells song rights in $150 million deals. That's a lot of coin. Notice the date there, January of 2021. About a year before Neil Young requested his music get taken down from Spotify, Hypnosis Songs Fund spent an estimated $150 million on 1,100 songs written by the Canadian folk rocker. Hypnosis has acquired a lot of catalogs. They've got a lot of great music in their catalog, so they're continuously investing in that. So it's hard to say whether the terms of that acquisition gave Neil Young the ability to have a say in what platforms his music is published on, or if they're just kind of doing the legend a favor and just going, okay, we'll take it down for a set period of time. It's been a little over 2 years since it was taken down. And he's got to take the dig there. It says, my return to low-res Spotify. Wow. Spotify, the #1 streamer of low-res music in the world. Spotify, where you get less quality than we made, will now be the home of my music again. He's kind of coming back kicking and screaming here. You just kind of have to wonder if there were any outside owners of the music involved that were like, yo, we got to get this back on here. He says, my decision comes as music services Apple and Amazon have started serving the same disinformation podcast features I had opposed at Spotify. It seems like he's referring to the new deal with Joe Rogan, where he's going to be appearing on other, he just seems to really not like Joe Rogan. And Rogan has said publicly that he's actually a fan of his music. And so my whole thing is, do you hate Rogan personally, or I would like just go on Rogan and disagree with him? Cat Williams recently did that, where he was like, Joe would never have me on, and Rogan was like, no, I will have you on. I'd love to see an episode where Neil Young, just go on there and disagree with him, see what happens. I don't understand that. I cannot just leave Apple and Amazon like I did Spotify, because all my music would have very little streaming outlet to music lovers at all. So I've returned to Spotify in sincere hopes that Spotify's sound quality will improve. We're kind of shifting the goalposts here a little bit. I don't think sound quality was ever mentioned in the first statement. And we'll be able to hear the music as we made it. Tidal, where my music is presented, are all high res as well. I hope all you millions of Spotify users enjoy my song. They'll now be there for you, except for the full sound we created. Hopefully Spotify will turn to high res and as the answer and serve all the music to everyone. Spotify, you can do it. Really be #1 in all ways. You have the music and the listeners. Start with a limited high res tier and build from there. Thanks for your support, folks. For me, I guess if you disagree with Rogan that much, I'm really confident that he would probably have you on the show and would be willing to engage you in debate and have a respectful exchange of ideas. You don't have to agree to be friends. So this idea that he needs to be pulled from the airwaves, I certainly don't agree with. And there more conversation, not less, is always better. No disrespect to Neil Young. He's back on Spotify, but I just really didn't see the point of this. Maybe I'm wrong, folks. Let me know what you think about this in the comments down below. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. And be sure to hit that subscribe button for the latest news and updates right here from Rockfeed.